American dream for some time was working in your 20s to save up and then get a house by 30 years old.
Now that median home buying age is a lot later.
First-time home buyers are getting older, with the typical age now around 40.
They're probably dealing with student loans, their rents have been going up, groceries cost more.
Jeff Ostrowski with Bankrate said those bills are just part of the burden.
The big reason that people are waiting longer is that home prices are at record highs.
So that was a recent report that actually dropped today, indicating that the average age for a first-time home buyer in the United States of America has risen from an all-time high of 38 years old just a couple of months ago to 40 years old, and this is among other bits of troubling data, like the fact that new first-time home buyers only represent 21% of the market, meaning that 1 out of every 5 people who are getting a home have never owned a home before, and most of the people who are buying a home are actually buying their second or third property in their lifetime. Whether or not they own multiple properties or not, that makes no matter. And this is a troubling sign in this country that has severe and devastating consequences for the nation, and it is leading to a bunch of bad candidates being elected to office. Chief among them is Zohran Mamdani in New York City, who recently won the mayoral election running on a quote-unquote affordability agenda that ironically will drive up costs even further and make the situation that much worse in New York City. But the fact is, he was at least running on this agenda. I ended up posting on twitter.com earlier today from the time that I was shooting this video, probably a couple of days ago from the time that you're seeing this video, that one of the reasons why Mamdani ended up winning election is due to the fact that people like me, who are somebody who makes a good living, I happen to be in my mid-30s, I have a wife that works as a real estate lawyer, she also makes a good living, are unable to buy a home in our own neighborhood or in the neighborhood that I grew up in, which is actually a little bit cheaper than the area that I currently live in as of right now. And this is absolutely crazy because if you think about it, I'm the smartest YouTuber in the game, over 500,000 subscribers. In many parts of the country, I would be considered at least in the top 2%, definitely the top 5% of income earners, but the prices of homes have gotten so outrageous in this nation due to a multitude of factors that need to be addressed. And first and foremost, as we talked about a million times on this channel, we have to build more homes. We have to build more apartments. We have to cut back on these restrictions, because what we ultimately end up seeing is that those restrictions are pushing people into more radical directions, because when they can't afford to buy a home, they don't blame the regulations. Who they actually blame are the politicians, and they think capitalism is behind it all, and that leads to an abject disaster. So this is what we're going to talk about today. This very troubling data that we are seeing, how the right wing is inappropriately responding to the recent election of Zohran Mamdani rather than focusing on the issues. But before we get into that, I want to thank everybody who contributes to my eventual house fund over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
First-time homebuyers' average age hit 40 years old. Again, it's never been older for a first-time homebuyer. First-time homebuyers make up for 21% of all home sales. That's a new low since 1981. And there's a record amount of people who bought cash only at 26%. So again, that is outpacing first-time homebuyers. Repeat buyers' average age at a record 62 years old, taking advantage of some equity in some homes and using that cash for future purchases.
So every year, it seems that the data on home ownership and first-time home ownership gets significantly worse in this country. And to take you back a couple of decades, a year after I was born in 1991, the median age for a first-time homebuyer was 28 years old. And again, as of the beginning of this year, that had jumped all the way to 38 years old. However, now, as of today, based on new data, whether you want to trust it or not, it has jumped again to age 40, which means, again, if you want to buy a home, start a family in this country, the median age where you are expected to be able to do that, or where you actually can do that, is around the age of 40, which is right in the middle of your peak income earning years. And on a 30-year fixed mortgage, that means you're going to be paying that off until you're age 70, which is obviously an unsustainable project. And in addition to that, you also have a bunch of older people that are bidding up the cost of properties because they represent 80% of the market. The people who already have homes, already have properties, properties are just able to build and build up their wealth over time, and a lot of people are feeling locked out of this situation. Now, I will give you an anecdote from election day, because I actually ended up having lunch with somebody who works in digital media just like me, who is actually across the political spectrum, and one of the things that we ended up discovering through the conversation is that we have like a very simple dream that we want to achieve, that based on the income that I earn and my wife earns, and presumably the income that she earns and her husband earns combined, we should be able to do so. But based on the fact that we live in places where they don't build anything, it seems rather impossible. And I want you guys to really pause for a moment and hear this dream that, again, two people who probably make more money than a good segment of their audience are trying to achieve, again, north of 35 years old. And that is to have a backyard, to be able to have a barbecue where your family can come over. Look, I'm not joking, guys. This is something that throughout the course of this summer, the wife and I were thinking about and talking about a lot, how it kind of sucks that even though our apartment is ideal in a lot of ways, for instance, we're in one of the few New York City units that has an in-unit washer and dryer. I was fortunate enough to get a parking space in a garage when another tenant moved out of my building, and that is a big benefit to me because my previous car actually got stolen. But the thing that we want at this moment in time, again, as two good income earning people in the content space, people that you guys likely watch on the internet.com or have seen multiple of our videos, we just want to be able to barbecue and invite our family over for a barbecue. And the crazy thing is that we don't know, or at least I don't know, a lot of people in my friend group that have that capability either. Like, it is not such a luxury, or it shouldn't be such a luxury, that is denied to you until you're north of 40 to be able to host a gathering with enough of your family members, but you can't actually do it due to the fact that the current place that you're living in is just too small and you don't have any kind of outdoor space in order to enjoy with members of your family. But that's the thing. Many Americans are unable to do that. Many Americans are unable to own a home, and this is because prices are up dramatically due to the fact that interest rates are up. And of course, we have incredibly low inventory on the market right now. And this is due to the fact that interest rates got so low and everybody's expecting them to go down again, that prices ended up accelerating like crazy, and nobody wants to sell at these higher interest rates in order to buy a new home because they probably have a significantly better rate at this moment in time. So inventory is being held down artificially. New building in a lot of places in this country is just a thing that does not happen. And this is what is leading to disastrous political decisions like electing somebody like Zoran Mamdani. And again, I will emphasize that Governor Andrew Cuomo was absolutely terrible on the campaign trail. To this day, even though all his affiliated groups spent tens of millions of dollars on his campaign, I can't tell you one thing that he was for other than the fact that he liked Israel, which is a great position to have running for a local government position, apparently, according to Andrew Cuomo, and he wants you to elect him because his last name is Cuomo. As much as I despise Zoran Mamdani, at least he ran on a very understandable platform, which was affordability in terms of housing, even though his policies will do the exact opposite, free buses, which I think is absurd, and government-run grocery stores. Like, you could name his platform, and every single New Yorker can name his platform, even if they're superficially paying attention. And in fact, there's actually a benefit of superficially paying attention to Mamdani's platform, because him advocating for a rent freeze, a lot of people don't realize that that only applies to rent-stabilized units, and of course, they definitely don't understand how that will backfire and reduce inventory on the market, thus raising the prices of market rate apartments. They think that they're just going to get their rent frozen, so they're going out and voting in droves in order to get this candidate elected based on his charlatan-like promises. Now, a lot of people have taken to blaming the foreign-born population of New York City, or the transplant population of New York City, or the young female population of New York City for Mamdani's win. And while all of those groups did disproportionately vote in favor of Zoran Mamdani, in reality, just attacking attacking the electorate as it exists is not a solution to the problems that we are facing. Remember, a very liberal city also had a mayoral election in the Midwest at the same time that Mamdani was running in New York City. And like in New York City, the candidate was a Muslim socialist, Omar Fatah, and Omar Fatah actually had an advantage over Mamdani in that there was ranked choice voting for the general election, and he ran his campaign all about trying to get people to not rank Jacob Frey, who should have his last name pronounced Frey, as a candidate on the ballot. So you have your establishment candidate, Jacob Frey, who has been there for 2 terms already, and he's going up against the new up-and-coming Muslim socialist who is running on the issue of affordability. However, in that particular election, the Mamdani-like candidate, Fatah, ended up coming in second in the initial round of voting, but by the second round of ranked choice voting, it was already over and Jacob Frey won, and the reason why he won, the reason why he was able to beat the foreign money from all these Muslim organizations, the left-wing media pushing Omar Fatah, and all the different various policies that were identical to what we saw from Zoran Mamdani was due to the fact that Frey had already addressed the affordability issue. Rents were actually going down, prices for properties were actually dropping, and the chances of you becoming a first-time homeowner in the city of Minneapolis went up the younger you were, not down like we see in other parts of the country. And the reason for that is because Frey actually ran on and delivered a real affordability agenda. He did what I've been suggesting for a very long time, which is allow people to build more housing. And guess what? That works everywhere in the country. It works everywhere where it's been tried. Rents in Austin are down. Rents in a lot of parts of Florida where they allow building are down. Rents in the DFW area, which is now past Austin as the fastest growing metro in the entire country, are stable. Rents and home prices in Houston tend to track way better with the rate of income growth in that area. So those are places where home ownership is not out of reach, even if there are criticisms of individual aspects of the policies implemented in those areas. I mean, I'm a big fan of showing you this chart of Nashville home prices and Nashville building permits. And one of the things that you see is that except for COVID, when there were supply shortages and they were quite literally not building, this tracks almost identically, and this is reflected in the prices that people are paying, especially when you factor in inflation. Jacob Frey is nobody's conservative. Obviously, this is the guy who cried on George Floyd's golden casket, and against almost any other candidate, I would have likely been rooting for him to lose, but he absolutely dominated this election for a third term, which is incredibly difficult to do, and the reason he dominated this election is because he actually addressed the affordability crisis head on. And when you had a goofy ass socialist with all these fantastical promises, those charlatan-like tactics didn't play in Minneapolis because they were already seeing the results of allowing the market to function. This guy essentially instituted one of the most conservative ways to build housing in the entire country, and he did it with a legislature that was full of people like Omar Fatah, a bunch of socialists. And by the way, he also did it while resisting urges to implement rent control, which people actually voted to give the city of Minneapolis the power to do, and St. Paul as well. St. Paul implemented it.
Builders still build in Minneapolis. Building permits were up 65% last winter. But in St. Paul, they're down 60% because of rent control. You're not going to get more apartments by pushing this.
This pause is one of those rare interview moments where silence reveals so much.
Building went down. It's been an absolute disaster. They've had to change the law multiple different times. But conversely, in Minneapolis, prices are falling. Again, the charts are so obvious. The problem with housing is a supply issue. Every single other issue is superfluous and pointless. I mean, how many times do you guys hear about how BlackRock or Blackstone are buying up single family homes and they're trying to box you out of the economy? How many people push that lie to you all the time, even though institutional investors only represent about 2% of single-family home ownership? And by the way, that is declining, not rising. And in fact, the places where people buy these single-family homes that happen to be institutional investors are the places where home prices are dropping. They're more affordable. They're in places like Texas, not New York City, not Los Angeles, not San Francisco. So the idea that institutional investors correlate with a rise in home prices is completely backwards and false. If anything, the opposite is true. Look, we have another election coming around next year, and the fact is, if we don't face up to the reality of these issues, then the Democrats are going to steal them from us. I have been a big proponent of Ezra Klein's book, Abundance, and the reason for that is because I can see where the tide is turning, and while Mamdani is definitely a step back in terms of that particular mission, abundance-style Democrats are gaining victories across the country, and guess what? When they actually do lower the cost of housing by embracing building more stuff, you're going to see election victories like Jacob Frey, except instead of defeating the socialists within their own party, they're going to be defeating Republican candidates across the country. Look, we got to keep it real with the people that are out there. The reason why home prices are so expensive is not because of the socialism part of democratic socialism. It's because of the democratic part. Homeowners are reliable voters. Giving them protections and making sure that the value of their property goes up wins electorally, and it has won for decades in a bunch of these different areas. And the fact is, this is the hardest constituency in order to overcome, in order to get good policy, and it takes brave politicians in order to do so, and Republicans should be those brave politicians. And you know what? It doesn't look like the Republicans get it. I mean, in Texas, they understand it. The statewide regulatory environment essentially makes it impossible for left-wing cities to overregulate housing, and this is why housing ends up falling in Texas, even though they're the fastest growing state in the union. But obviously in New York and in Los Angeles or California as a whole, when you see declining population, home prices still end up going up, and this is because of a mix mash of, again, rent control, rent stabilization, and pro-home ownership price policies that are meant deliberately to block building in order to constrict supply, in order to make sure prices rise. This is an unsustainable model. People are going to get angry, and when they get angry, they churn towards charlatans like Zohran Mamdani, especially when the alternative candidate is not providing anything as an alternative other than Mamdani doesn't like Israel. And again, I disagree with Zohran Mamdani's foreign policy prescriptions, but that's not relevant to him being the mayor of the city of New York, or at least it shouldn't be relevant. However, this is basically what Andrew Cuomo's entire primary campaign was about, and he never really went after him on the issues that matter, partially because Andrew Cuomo is the one who signed the stupid-ass rent control law that was put forward by the progressives at the statewide level when he was governor. But Jacob Frey proved the truth that if you actually run on and deliver on this issue, you can pull the left-wing base away from socialism. You can pull them towards sensible policy. And by the way, Jacob Frey is not the only one who is angling for this position as the next issue for the left wing. I talked a lot about Ezra Klein's book, Abundance. I definitely recommend you guys get it. You will learn a lot, but he is making great strides in order to push the Democratic Party in that direction. And there's a reason why a bunch of regular ass Democrats dramatically overperformed Zohran Mamdani, and that is based on the fact that they are embracing these ideas. Like, one of the downsides of Jack Ciattarelli, and I showed it in the ad, but I didn't address it because, you know, it's prior to the election, and overall I preferred him to Mikey Sherrill, so I wanted you to go out and vote for him, was the fact that he was talking about overbuilding as a big problem in New Jersey.
I'll work with President Trump and end Murphy's Sanctuary State on day one. We'll cap property taxes, stop overdevelopment.
Now, that was the ad that I showed you where he mentioned overdevelopment, but it actually gets worse than that. I found an ad after the election that Ciattarelli was running about how Mikey Sherrill is a terrible candidate because she said they got to build more houses.
We've got to build more houses. More houses. More houses. More houses. We've got to build more houses.
Guys, this is terrible policy, a terrible direction for America to go. And in reality, Jersey City and a bunch of the places on the opposite side of the Hudson River have improved dramatically due to the fact that they've embraced cleaning up their zoning code, which is why a lot of people that might leave New York City aren't going to go to Florida or Texas. They might just jump the river and end up in New Jersey. And it's not just Chitterelli. Curtis Lewa, somebody who I also criticize, was running on the idea of blocking changes in the zoning code to build more units under the premise that we were going to retrofit office buildings, which, by the way, is not a solution, and it can actually cost significantly more money and take way more time than actually allowing the private building of new units.
And then in terms of rentals, we have affordable housing that can be built in these huge skyscrapers. You see them all throughout Manhattan and in northern Brooklyn and in Long Island City, which we have 25 Empire State Buildings full of commercial space that will never be occupied for office space. We should be converting them into affordable apartments. They're in dense areas. The infrastructure can support it. I'm the only candidate here who's against the city of yes that would destroy residential neighborhoods. I have to interrupt you because
the tragic irony of this New York City mayoral election is that Mamdani was able to win just by saying the words affordability, but each and every one of the top three candidates actually have a terrible record on affordability or terrible policy prescriptions on that particular issue. So no matter what, the bad times were going to be here for the city of New York. So yeah, I don't expect Mamdani, who has stated on his website that he wants to block most private development that doesn't meet his standards, to actually achieve his goals. He's also going to try to do public sector projects, which again blow up the budget and never get built to the capacity that's originally promised. And in reality, as much as I hate Andrew Cuomo, probably he would have been the most vulnerable to being nudged by the abundance style Democrats, so he might have been the best, but his history shows us that he'll kind of go along with anything in order to make sure that he can say, I passed something, which is how he signed that rent control law, which was based on the idea that, again, he would just sign whatever they did because he wanted to have an achievement on his board because he doesn't believe in anything. Look, guys, I don't know if this is going to get better. I don't know if this message is going to resonate. I don't know if people are going to understand the absolute necessity of increasing housing supply in this country and getting rid of all these different programs that stimulate demand in the economy, like rent subsidies, first-time homebuyer subsidies, and all the stuff that's typically offered. But if we don't actually address this, if this ends up blowing up into a significantly worse issue down the line, then you're going to expect, or you should expect, more socialist type candidates to take over in the Democratic Party. And by the way, we have a very polarized electorate on the national level. So once you get the nomination, you have a pretty good chance of being the president of the United States, or in a lot of states where elections are close, winning that seat with these horrible policies. But on the local level, as we've seen with Mamdani, if you're the only candidate talking about affordability, your chances of winning are pretty good, even if all your policy prescriptions, being socialist policy prescriptions, will definitely 100% backfire. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the absolute madness in the housing market. Till next time.